Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast on this Tuesday edition. Sterling Holmes, Joshua Briscoe. You can follow him at JB Briscoe, myself at Homestretch KC. Briscoe, baby. One, love the hat that just says podcast. Very strong. You're wearing a t-shirt indoors. You're going to have an extremely high gas bill because it is freezing outside with lots of snow on the ground. I'm more of a bundler myself, trying to stay warm in the frigid tundra that is Kansas City. But how are you doing, Briscoe?
I'm doing good. I appreciate the love for the hat, just supporting the podcast medium in general. I think that's important. And you are 100% right. I actually have a hoodie back here that I was going to be wearing during the show today. But with this being the first on-camera thing that I do on Tuesdays, frequently I will get the text from you, hey, everything all still looking good for 3:00. I'll say, absolutely. Yes, sir. And somewhere around then is when I get into the shower very frequently. The midday Tuesday shower has become a major part of what was my football season. And so when we are in a situation like this, frozen tundra, does not stop snowing, really brutal on a lot of levels. There's a space heater cranking in the bathroom as often as need be. And so basically, I just walked out of a sauna to do this show with you. We have a small bathroom, a pumping space heater, and the hottest water that my house can make. So I am right now still in the aftershocks of the warmth. Plus, I get energetic. It's Tuesdays with Sterling. You know that I have the energy to talk about a long off season just boiling inside of me. So that's why I am in a t-shirt and sweatpants here for the beginning of this show today. If it chills down in here, I may make a mid-show pivot.
Yeah, I'm just a classy man. I have a collar on because I actually care about this show, but that's okay.
Sterling, you have a collar on with no evidence that any of the buttons are buttoned. Okay, now we can see one of them. Yeah. With the way that you were framed up, that could have been literally unbuttoned all the way to the navel.
I let it fly, which is what Patrick Mahomes needs to do because the offense looks abysmal when he does not, which I kind of want to get into. It's the offseason. We're probably going to go a full hour. We'll probably, keep it more specific to each show. I want to kind of have talking points a little bit like segments in radio that we used to do. And one of the segments I wanted to do today is we talked about it last Wednesday, actually, myself and Adam Best. But Verderam put a great article out today on Sports Illustrated a couple of days ago. I talked with him about it. And I just think there's some fun talking points of the offense. And I think we've all separately, me, Best, and Verderam, have come to some sort of conclusion. I talked with Teicher about this today. He kind of has a little different thought process on this, but again, still a similar thought process. So it's like we're all getting to this area of where, one, nuance is important. The Chiefs went 15-2. They made the Super Bowl. Okay, now that's out of the way. We can actually talk about this, okay? But I think the offense almost needs to fundamentally change to an extent. And I think one year that everyone goes back to specifically is 2022. That's the year that I go to because that's post Tyreek Hill. That is realistic. Okay. Let's be in like, well, why can't they do the 2019 offense? Well, because it's a lot different. Things have changed. That there are a lot of different aspects from why the Chiefs cannot do that. But 2022, when the cover 2 came in, but no Tyreek Hill, and Patrick still threw for over 5,200 yards. Okay, so this is why I think that's the year I'm going to go to. And there's a lot of differing viewpoints on this, but again, the same conclusion remains. The average depth of target for Patrick Mahomes is becoming precariously low to the point where I don't care what the defense are doing. You're telling me, as Verderam said today, you're telling me the Bengals are seeing single high coverage? No, they're running the same defense against the Bengals that they would against Kansas City. Okay, difference is Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, yada, yada. Those guys are great receivers. But the Chiefs didn't have any slouches at wide receivers this year necessarily, right? So is that scheme? I just want to try and get to the bottom of why the Chiefs have struggled to move the ball. They have gone to a yak offense, but without the personnel that really thrives. Rashee Rice, yes. But Hollywood Brown, look at his career. He's not been a yak guy. DeAndre Hopkins, definitely not a yak guy. Travis Kelce had 300 fewer yards after catch this season than he did in 2022. That's a big difference. Doesn't Mahomes' numbers look better if he had 4,250 versus 3,950? Little different, right? So I wonder why. Because Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target in 2022 when he threw for 5,200 yards, 23rd in the NFL. Do you know what it was this year, Briscoe?
Don't know. I mean, it was not great.
Take a guess of where his average depth of target was this year.
Is this amongst teams or amongst like qualifying quarterbacks? Do you know? Are there more than 30? Is he lower than 32nd?
He is lower than 32nd.
Okay, I think it might be 35th.
I think the number was 41.
Oh, brother.
It was ahead of Gardner Minshew, which was shocking.
Yeah, no kidding.
And Tua Tagovailoa, which is not shocking, who
Not
I think
shocking.
a lot of people would just that offense is yak. So I wonder, and I'm trying to pose this question. It's more of a conversation, if anything, which I know it's been very one-sided conversation as I'm laying this out right now. But I wanted to at least lay some of these aspects out there for everyone. Does the offensive scheme need to change? Is the personnel something that needs to change? Is it some of the coaching that needs to change? Or is this all solved by having a better run game? Like, again, Adam Teicher was more or less being like, I think a run game really is going to almost just completely, if you had a running back who was athletic enough and quick enough to change the game for the Chiefs offense, that's the biggest aspect that they really need. Verderam was sitting here going, Patrick needs to throw the ball down the field, trust his instincts. I was on that side a little bit too. So I don't know where you land in the conversation, but what it does bring up is why the Chiefs and shows the Chiefs have been on a downward trajectory offensively for multiple years now with, I think what a lot of people would assume, still some pretty good players.
Yeah, and so I think that the most evident truth is that almost any of those things could be a part of the solution. I think if you accept kind of the baseline statement here, which is the Chiefs offense needs another evolution, which is certainly a school of thought that I'm subscribed to at this point and was before this season, frankly. And then as the season went on, in a lot of ways, so were the Chiefs. So I'll kind of give you my optimist side and my pessimist side. I also want to give you another reason that 2022 is a fair thing to compare to. Patrick Mahomes' salary cap number in 2022 was a hair under $36 million. It right now next year is $66 million. He will not be on a $66 million cap hit. That money can move. He's still Patrick Mahomes, and Clark Hunt should have even more liquid income to be willing to put money in escrow to make all that happen. Okay, so don't sweat that. But it's another reason that, like, going back to 2018-19 doesn't work because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of things. I don't want to just go back and, summarize all the things that you appropriately kind of package together. But when you look at like comparable and achievable things, you got to acknowledge your quarterback has a cap hit now. I think that's even a bigger deal for the Eagles, who are still navigating that early with Hurts. And Mahomes is obviously clear of some big money years. The team has remained good. But you do have to make sure that you're like post-rookie contract to do any A to B comparing. With that being said, I think there are plenty of ways the Chiefs could fix the issues that we're talking about, could evolve in a positive way. The one that I want to give them instant credit for is one that we saw nothing from in the regular season, and that's the vertical passing game. We were all collectively and correctly obsessed with the deep ball in St. Joe. We saw clip after clip after clip of Xavier Worthy downfield, Hollywood Brown downfield. Look at Matt Nagy dancing after a completion. Look at Travis Kelce, overjoyed to see how this offense is sharing the burden. Then the season begins, and we see Rashee Rice in an absolute breakout year lane. You can't guarantee what would have happened, but it really felt like the offense was running with Rashee Rice being the guy that moves the chains for you, while Worthy and Hollywood are these explosive guys that can take the top off the defense and give you, again, just that explosion back in your offense. Then you have a high energy, but kind of a low efficiency runner in Isaiah Pacheco, who to Teicher's point, you want to have a running back with some juice. I am well documented since let's call it March of 2020 on kind of where I've been on the running back investment portfolio, right? I don't want to put a lot of resources into that, but the Chiefs thought they'd have Pacheco. That was partially their own fault because they had no real backups out of training camp. They got P. Ryan, and you see the pieces come together. So my long and winding road here is to say that I absolutely agree that there needs to be some sort of adjustment, I'm going to keep using the word evolution for the Chiefs offense. I think they were going to evolve this year. Then they lost their deep threat, their veteran deep threat. The rookie deep threat just took some time to develop, I think is according to plan. Their short intermediate option A got hurt when their own quarterback threw his shoulder into his knee trying to make a tackle on a pick return. And now Travis Kelce, a slower version of a very good player, is still kind of your X receiver in a lot of ways, when in reality, at 35 years old, he's merely an excellent tight end, right? So I think we'll look back at this. Maybe I'm just kind of giving away my hand here. I think we'll look back at this season in some ways as an overachievement because of the number of things the Chiefs had to overcome. But because they were able to do it on a week-to-week basis, I also think this season's a disappointment. This season was about three-peating and overcoming all of these margins. And then they were able to do that every step along the way until they got totally pantsed in the Super Bowl. So, again, I think there's a lot of forward-looking things. I wonder, frankly, I wonder how much the offense changes if they stick with Kingsley Suamati. Or maybe, let's say, if they stick with Kingsley and he develops over 10 weeks, right? Like, a lot of if statements. But that's what you usually do in an offseason when your team doesn't win the Super Bowl. You go through some of those hypotheticals. And for the first time in 3 years, we're there.
And that's what it comes down to is the Chiefs still went 15-2. And I think you brought it up so eloquently of this may have been an overachievement based on what the thought process really was. I think the Chiefs maybe tried to evolve, at least in the past game. And then once the injuries to Rashee Rice and Hollywood happened, well, then they had to bring in other guys. And as I mentioned, I love the name DeAndre Hopkins. The name's great. And we saw what he occasionally can do, but he doesn't really fit this offense. Like, that's not what this offense was built around. So they had to adjust on the fly. Maybe Travis Kelce lost that yak ability quicker than the Chiefs thought was going to happen. Even the year prior, the yak went down, but it wasn't necessarily completely drastic. This year was a complete fall off. The run game, I think we could have we could have saw this one coming.
Yes,
but the receivers to an
extent,
extent,
we talked about it.
Yeah, we did. But receiver wise, though, I think it's a good point of how much blame should they get versus almost how much credit do they deserve for adjusting and still finding a way to go 15-2, still finding a way to make it to the Super Bowl with the change of what we all thought was going to happen. I see this question from Toddy Lama on Twitter. Great question here. Actually, their comment is phenomenal. I think they just ran the Tooney and quick deliveries from Mahomes too many games and too much tape at Tooney at left tackle. They saved the vertical game for the playoffs, and it cuts off here, and didn't have the O-line to really hold up. Because if you did watch that game, at times you'd see guys open down the field, but the offensive line didn't hold up.
It was open all day, man.
All day. But so I think you saw from Nagy and Andy of, well, if the offensive line can just hold up, we do have the guys open down the field. The issue was the offensive line really never held up. And if they ever did, Patrick was in his own dome at that point and looked almost nervous to try and make a mistake because he kept making mistakes. So it was a culmination of everything. But I thought that was a great point right there of, I do think in the Eagles game specifically, they were going to try to unleash the deep ball. The issue was the offensive line just couldn't hold up or hang. And the part on Tooney was interesting because I talked to Will Anderson at the Super Bowl. And always love Will Anderson. You can see that on, I believe, Stacking the Box. Just so much fun and enjoyment talking with him. We had gotten to the whole ref conversation as well with the Chiefs and all that stuff. A lot of fun. But he brought up, and I asked him, like, what were your thoughts on Joe Tooney moving from guard to tackle? He's like, dude, he's a beast. He's amazing. And I said, was it hard to go up against him if you guys don't have a lot of tape? And he goes, quite frankly, we at least had a few games to go off of. So we felt like we had at least enough tape to get some sort of understanding, which I thought was interesting. It's not quite like baseball with the starter, but they at least had some tape to go off of Joe. And they felt like that was enough to get some sort of game plan against him. So the Eagles, and to this guy's point, yeah, they now had a lot of tape on Joe. It was no longer an unknown commodity. They knew what Joe Tooney was trying to do.
Yeah, and we talked about this some on Tuesday, and I'll give a little cross promo because we're going to spend a lot more time on the left tackle thing on Only Weird Games today over on KCSN. And so I've been thinking about that a ton. And I think that comment is right, that the Eagles knew what Tooney was going to bring, and you have him doing more vertical sets and going for a more vertical passing game. Juwan Taylor is always doing vertical sets, dropping backwards basically in pass protection. And the Eagles had great physical matchups for that style of play. Now, that's a coaching loss from the Chiefs side, because we talked about it late in the week before the Super Bowl of like, well, the Eagles have a matchup advantage for Joe Tooney in particular. We saw how they also used that against Juwan Taylor and what he did. How serious was the consideration to make plan A not what they did in the Super Bowl, and what was plan B? Because we talked about DJ Humphries a ton, and I can't guarantee that DJ Humphries would have fixed anything in the Super Bowl. What I can guarantee you is that Joe Tooney at left guard would have been a lot better player than Mike Caliendo at left guard. And if you tell me the day you saw from Joe Tooney, if you say I am confident that he was significantly better than DJ Humphries, I cannot take you seriously, because like it was about as bad as it can be for Tooney. And I'm sure that Joe Tooney, an all-time great guard, didn't necessarily have his heart set on getting his ass beat at left tackle in a Super Bowl. Like that's not really fair to him, and I'm sure that's not something that he's going to look back on fondly in his nearly flawless career. He has now a huge flaw in a Super Bowl when he was forced to play out of position. So looking back to that, if the plan was, and Nate Taylor told us this also last week on Weird Games, if the plan was the deep ball, here you go. We like what we have against the Eagles' deep secondary. We haven't shown a ton of this. Here's how we think we can use it. Here's where Xavier Worthy's going to come out. Well, I'm not Andy Reid. I'm not even nearly as accomplished as Matt Nagy or Andy Heck or anyone working for an NFL team right now.
You can grow a mustache though, so
that's true. I think I have Andy Reid coaching tree potential. I'm not sure if I ever really lived up to it. But the thing that's baffling there is that I know that to get your deep passing game going, you need to at least not lose embarrassingly quickly on the offensive line. And the Chiefs went in with a total disadvantage in that matchup. They didn't have another bullet loaded, essentially, of, okay, well, we got Humphries at left tackle, Tooney at guard. They haven't seen any of this. This is brand new. Let's show them this in the Super Bowl, even if that would have leaked out days before or whatever. That could have been something different. Inserting Humphries in the game as soon as you realize the matchup advantage the matchup disadvantage you had, if you hadn't already realized that, that's the time to do it too. So I am frustrated. Or if you're saying we are going to die with Joe Tooney at left tackle and Mike Caliendo at left guard, fine. What's offensive plan B? Because maybe they eventually broke glass. We saw a little bit more Mahomes moving, a little more moving him to his right. You saw that incredible dart to Xavier Worthy when the game was well out of hand. You could see some glimpses of that, but obviously it was all way too little, way too late. The Chiefs didn't get a lot of time to adjust because of how quickly it melted down, but some of these things were foreseeable, noting like, yeah, the Eagles have extra weeks to watch and prepare for Tooney at tackle and the matchup advantage. What do you do as a coaching staff in the face of that? The Chiefs didn't have any answers.
So I look at this going into next year a couple of ways. If Rashee Rice is healthy, I think already this offense, and not just healthy, but healthy in non-suspended, the offense is going to look really good. Mm-hmm. It's not going to look like 2022, quite frankly, but with him and Xavier Worthy, it's going to look damn good. He is your yak guy, and I think the offense right then and there is going to be pretty impressive. He averaged 8.3 yards after catch in 2023. Rashee Rice was third in the entire NFL in yards after catch. Just insane. That is the offense, the role that fits him and suits him perfectly. Couple that with Xavier, the Chiefs' offense is going to take a step forward. But at the same time, you don't know how many games he's going to miss.
Yep.
We don't really know yet. And you can't just say, okay, we'll go in with Travis Kelce a year older if he decides to come back. Okay, we have Xavier Worthy, but then what following him? There needs to be some resources and allocation, because quite frankly, to everyone listening right now, this is not what I think a lot of people want to hear. Okay. I don't see overarching changes on the offensive line. I don't. Juwan's going to be your right tackle.
Yep.
Creed Humphries, your center. Great.
Yep.
Left guard, more than likely, is going to still be Joe Tooney with a chance of him being extended to kind of bring the cap hit down. That's also great. But right guard and left tackle, I think you're going to have some question marks. Do you want Ronnie Stanley to get a large contract here in Kansas City, who's been very injured in his career? Do you want Cam Robinson, who was not thoroughly loved in Jacksonville, who went to Minnesota and whose PFF grade is average. Do you want to pay him 4 for 80? Like, you're drafting 31. Like, I'm just trying to be a realist here. I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I'm just trying to be a realist and figure out where the Chiefs go forward from here with trying to improve the offensive line. I don't think there's going to be a good option at left tackle next year. Like, if you're expecting the savior there, I think you're wrong. I think you're hoping. I think the realistic possibility is you're looking at DJ Humphries coming back with Kingsley Suamataia in a camp battle. That's probably what you're seeing. With, again, question marks at right guard now. So the Chiefs are going to have to do something different. And where I think they do something different is, one, Rice coming back with the yak ability, and two, the run game. I think there were holes. I really do have, looking back and talking with some more folk, there actually were holes that the offensive line opened up. Just Kareem Hunt has the vision, but not the athleticism, while Pacheco doesn't have the vision, and the athleticism was kind of waned and drained from the injury. So where do the Chiefs go? One name I want to bring up right now, because I think it's interesting. Raheem Mostert was just released by the Miami Dolphins today. He's not a long-term fix, but he might be a yearly fix. Do you take a look at an explosive running back, the veteran ability of Raheem, who was phenomenal in 2023? Is that a guy you look at that you think, you know what? We don't have to spend a lot of resources here. Yes, it's not a long-term fix, but it's at least a fix for the season. We think we could be better this upcoming season with Raheem Mostert. I think if it were me, I would take a good hard look at him.
Yeah, so he's like, what, 2.5 years older than Samaje Perine? Mostert's 32. 30. Mostert will turn 33 in April, and Perine, I think, will turn 33 or 30 in September. So, yeah.
But there's not a lot of wear and tear. There's a lot of tear on Raheem Mostert, but
not a lot of wear.
Not a lot of wear.
No, absolutely. I think I just was curious about that as my first thought, to like make sure that he's not going to be looking for more than that type of deal. I think that's probably where they go running back room wise. I think it's probably Pacheco, late day 2, early day 3, probably draft pick, and then their favorite of those veterans. Maybe it's Mostert, maybe it's Perine again, maybe it's someone else in that general space. I think it's worth treating the position like the position group matters, which was not something they did last offseason. Last offseason, the Chiefs were ignoring running back in a way that was very strange to me, after way over investing in it years prior. So I'm not exactly sure where what lessons they've learned from that, or what the actual strategy is. You would like to feel like you have a weapon, though, in your backfield. And that's the thing that the Chiefs didn't really ever have this year. Kareem Hunt was like a blunt object, but I don't think I would necessarily call him a weapon. And Pacheco, post-injury, never really got back to that. And he was always something. He wasn't an exciting weapon in the same way that a lot of these more explosive backs would be. So I think it's worth looking for ways to find a guy that has an extra gear for your offense. Someone who's not currently in this room right now. And so I think that's where I'm already kind of giving up the ground of like, yeah, if spend a day 3 pick on a running back, and I'm not going to scream about it because you do need to find a little more pop somewhere. I don't know if the Chiefs know what kind of running backs they want, though. Like, I don't know who has been a great fit in this offense, who has signed. I was thinking about Hunt and Damian Williams, right? What I was going to say is, I don't know who's been in this offense since Kareem Hunt, who was basically signed to be the starter or signed to be the lead guy, who then kind of achieved that. Damian Williams was like a reclamation project in his own right, and then totally came into his own. Maybe that's something that a Mostert type could bring. I kind of thought that Perine might have that potential. They never really used him that way. Also didn't have him in training camp. I don't know. There are enough of those like kind of shallow holes in the offense that I think they'll find passable answers for. Then the much bigger holes, left tackle, potentially right guard, and all of that is where I'm losing my sleep if I'm Brett Veach.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the offensive line with you. Just a little deeper dive 1 second. I do think 2 running backs are interesting, but don't really fit the mold of explosiveness that I think you could get around round 4, probably. Devin Neal from Kansas. I know a lot of KU fans will love that. He's a big dude. He is so fun to watch. I don't know how he translates as far as going up now against bigger guys. College, he can drag guys along. He's just a man among large boys, but
Right.
but I don't know how that translates. I think Devin Neal is interesting. That's coming from a Mizzou guy. And then Cam Scadaboo from Arizona State, he was going to be like a 5th, 6th, 7th rounder. And then obviously the Peach Bowl and the playoffs, and he was just ridiculous. The thing with Cam Scadaboo that I find interesting is, please, Cam, take this the correct way. It's almost like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in college, though.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what did he do great? Is he the fastest guy? No. Is he the strongest guy? No. Is he a good pass catcher? Yes. But like, I feel like people forget how good Clyde was in college at LSU. And then we just know what honestly, he was pretty good as a rookie too, if we're being completely honest. Like Cam Scadaboo, I think almost fits that mold a little bit of a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I wonder if the Chiefs want to take that, although this time around, it would be in the 4th round instead of the 1st round.
Right.
So, and who knows what that Peach Bowl did to bring up his stock. But I think Cam Scadaboo is a real possibility for Kansas City around that 4th round. But they may have to even do the 3rd because of where they're drafting. They have an extra 3rd round draft pick, obviously. But do you want to spend a 3rd rounder on a running back? I don't know.
That's where it comes down to, again, for whoever the guys end up being. This is a strategy that can get you in trouble, I guess, but I don't think it does get you in trouble at the running back position. I am less worried about the individual players than I am the overall value at running back, in terms of the fact that individual running backs can move the needle. It's very hard, but they can do it in some circumstances. But picking the right running back is incredibly difficult in its own right. Like, the Chiefs did draft a 1st round running back. Oh, people loved it. Oh, I can't believe they let Clyde Edwards-Helaire fall all the way to the Chiefs. Oh, this is going to be a dynasty. And then Jonathan Taylor went in the 2nd round. The Chiefs did invest in the position, and it busted because they picked the wrong one. And that's even harder and even more volatile at running back. Obviously, Clyde and Jonathan Taylor, very different type of football players. And Clyde, to your point about him having like a solid rookie season, Clyde had his career set back with on-field injury issues on multiple occasions. It's an incredibly difficult physical position. Isaiah Pacheco, if he was a 1st round pick, people would be losing their minds right now about how he got beat out by Kareem Hunt. But Isaiah Pacheco is a 7th round pick. So when he does miss a little bit of time, need an offseason surgery, miss a lot of time this year, and then Kareem Hunt comes in and outperforms him off the couch, you go, yeah, that's okay. That's fine. Isaiah Pacheco has way overachieved for a 7th round pick, and I think he could be a useful player again next year. I think he should get some of his burst back next year with a full offseason to heal and recover and rehabilitate from everything his ankle went through. But that, to me, is where it ends up coming around. And again, I know that this can be true everywhere. You don't always get the best player in the 1st round, or whoever that ends up being. But there's a much straighter line drawn amongst pass rushers than running backs, right? Your 1st round defensive ends have a very high success rate, and your top 10 defensive ends have like an even better one, obviously. That's how that curve kind of works. I don't want to see them invest a lot in the running back position. I want to see them invest smartly in the running back position.
The reason why we're also not talking about the defense is because I don't think the defense needs to do much. I really don't, by the way. We can have the conversation about that maybe next week, even if we want it to, because there's going to be some, obviously, Justin Reed, Nick Bolton, some of the question marks about some guys, Turk Wharton, who's coming back, who's not. But overall, I think Spag's game plan was good. I thought the defense as a whole this entire season was good. I really have hardly any qualms or questions with the defense. I trust Spags. My viewpoint on him did not change after the Eagles game because I thought he did a pretty good game plan. Dave Mayer, all that stuff. So I don't want to really get into that conversation. Maybe the Chris Jones conversation we can have next week. But again, kind of putting a bow offensively. The offensive line, I gave you my thoughts. We kind of glossed over yours right there, so I apologize. Yeah, sure. But getting your thoughts on the offensive line and what a realistic expectation should be. Not best case scenario, but base case. Best case can always happen, but that's a 3% of 5%. What's the 75% chance of what the offensive line looks like next year?
Joe Tooney at left guard, Creed Humphrey at center, Juwan Taylor at right tackle. Money at one position, draft pick at the other. I think that's most likely what it is. And not even necessarily a new draft pick. The thing I'm like a little bit worried about, and I've seen a couple of names come through the chat over the course of the show today in this conversation. I'm a little bit worried about the Chiefs trying to hit the veteran left tackle trade market and to see if there is anybody there that they want to invest in, sort of like they almost did with Orlando Brown Jr. Like his name was going around a little bit before he ended up getting moved, but it wasn't like super obvious how that would go. And then financially, it didn't really play out the way that the Chiefs thought it would, or ultimately the way that Orlando Brown thought that it would. And in retrospect, you'd take Orlando Brown in that contract he has with Cincinnati right now. But I think that had largely those doors had largely closed by the time that part of negotiation came about. I have a hard time envisioning the Chiefs running it back more or less at left tackle next year. I have a hard time believing that in St. Joe it's going to be Wanya Morris, Kingsley Suamataia, and DJ Humphries or his loose equivalent. I have a hard time seeing them go in with basically the exact same guys that did not get it done for them this year. But I wouldn't pay Trey Smith top of guard market money. You know who he is. You know who he is in your offense. You know what he looks like for your team. You know what you ask him to do and that he can do. He's a very, very good player. I would pay him like a very good player. It's even hard, though, to consider paying him like a very, very, very good player when you're already paying Tooney and Creed. And that the Juwan, here's what I'll say is if they don't restructure anything else, Tooney and Taylor will come off the books before Trey Smith's big money will come in. So they could do that looking down the road. But if you pay Trey Smith, I think you have like a pretty nuclear option of paying a left tackle of your choosing and then really backloading that thing and being able to say, yeah, we're gonna pay Tooney, Creed, and Juwan Taylor this year. And then next year, we're really paying the left tackle, the future left guard, potentially, the next right tackle. But like you can stagger that money out. So I think they could do that. They could build their best five in 2025. That would not be the best long-term plan, but they could do that. I think right now, I'm leaning towards Trey Smith being gone and them having a better time replacing him at guard than trying to go fresh at left tackle. The other thing for me, though, this is really dangerous. Depends on your risk tolerance and how you feel like this season went and what you're thinking about Mahomes. If you have an option to pay a weapon of some sort, I'm not saying it's necessarily T. Higgins.
But not necessarily, it's not T. Higgins either.
It won't be. I'll tell you what, it won't be T. Higgins.
Yeah, agreed.
But if the Chiefs have any internal faith whatsoever in Kingsley Suamataia in year 2 or Wanya Morris's potential to play right guard, something I'd be willing to see more of, you could bring your young guys into the starting lineup, which was originally the plan at some point, right? You could bring your young guys into the starting lineup and spend that money elsewhere. It's probably what they'll need to do if they want to sign Nick Bolton long-term. If they want to have another couple years with Justin Reed, you got to start thinking about that. There are so many levers you can pull in the salary cap discussion that it's very, very hard to say. Here's what they're limited to. They've got some options, but my personal best case scenario might not be paying for a free agent left tackle or paying Trey Smith and continuing to try to rise those guys up through your system and then to reinvest to patch up the holes in it as it goes on. I have a little bit of concern that the Chiefs are going to overpay for a solution, air quotes, at left tackle. I'm just worried about that solution working.
Well, because they overpaid for the solution at right tackle, who was supposed to be their left tackle originally, which I think people somewhat forget. Yeah, I think this was good. This was helpful. I do want to potentially next week talk about the defense and some spots and some interesting talking points there. But again, I think we're all on the same page, at least Briscoe. I think you and myself are, where the offense needs to reinvent itself. We're not asking for anything drastic. The Chiefs did still go 15-2, but you're seeing the slow downturn, and it should not be the case when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. Treating Patrick Mahomes as if he is, again, I'm not taking a shot on Alex Smith, but like treating him like he is Alex Smith doesn't make much sense. You're treating him like a game manager, and I just think that there are ways to operate differently. Now, the offensive line, I understand the questions, but Do we all think the offensive line was just this stud group when Patrick first got there? They were solid, but I mean, how many bad offensive lines has he played with? Yeah, he had Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz, but they got injured pretty quickly, right? So, I get they built the offensive
How
line
many
different.
times this year? How many times this year did you read a story or see some ranking about how the Chiefs have the best interior offensive line in football?
My pet peeve here is that either the interior offensive line is not, or the running backs are brutal. It can't be both. It can't be both. Because something has to give. Either Patrick has this year specifically struggled when it came to pressure just on the outside, which there was a lot of pressure on the outside, but also he would step up and he would get hit. Part of that's on him, and also the run game. If the offensive line is so good on the interior, making holes and all this stuff, then why wasn't the run game better? It can't be both. Again, my thoughts. I think the run game somewhat struggled just in general with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. But yes, you're completely right. How many times do we hear the best interior three and then, okay, let's prove it?
Right. Here's the other thing from what you just said about Mahomes that I think is important. I think we talk about it pretty well. Maybe it gets lost in some of these offseason conversations. Patrick Mahomes' evolution into a quarterback who can win like Alex Smith, who can win in game manager mode, is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen a young quarterback do. And it's one of the most important things that he has done as a pro football player. If Patrick Mahomes did not evolve in that way, they are down at least one Super Bowl, maybe more than one. That was an important and necessary and stunning evolution for him. But the reason that was so important and stunning and excellent on every level is because it added a way that he could win football games. And they won lots of them this way this year. Don't make any mistakes or make very few mistakes. Dink and dunk, matriculate the ball. We'll go 15-1 with our starters, and then we'll handle it in the postseason. And then they wanted to unveil the deep ball again in the Super Bowl, and they couldn't do it. Fine. The issue here is not that Mahomes can play games like that. He should play games like that. You get these heavy, high shells, dink and dunk, and take what the defense gives you. That is mature quarterbacking. The problem is I feel like we've been watching almost exclusively that version of Patrick Mahomes for these last couple of years. And that's even with wide receivers who theoretically thrive on deep balls. Not that MVS earned his trust or that Xavier Worthy in the first half of the season was a pro-ready NFL wide receiver. It took some time, but not very much time for what it's worth. I think Xavier Worthy's season still massively impressive. But it was the fact that Mahomes had a counterpunch for however defenses wanted to play him. We want to make you beat us with the deep ball and prove that you can do it. We want to make you beat us with the dink and dunk and prove that you can do it. We want to make you beat us with the running game and prove that you can do it. The Chiefs could. Every time Mahomes could. And now we've gone through kind of a drier couple of years of offense where the defense has been very good, where Mahomes has been very good on third downs and late games and in must-have-it situations. Again, there's one game where Mahomes has been bad these last 2 years. Unfortunately, just the last one we saw. But with all of that in mind, you just want him to continue to have that range and maybe not default quite so heavily to the tighter run offense that it feels like they use this year. Yeah. With way fewer weapons than they plan on entering the season with.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of reasons for it. Still a successful season overall, even if the final goal came up short. But again, I'm glad that you and I we're past the grieving stage and we're on to the understanding phase, if that makes sense, right? We're understanding what went wrong and we're trying to find where we think the Chiefs could potentially improve at heading into next year. We'll be doing this all off season long. I'll be back with Adam Best tomorrow. Best, again, always great at coming up with a lot of numbers. Briscoe will be back with myself next Tuesday. Again, I love doing this in the off season. Now we have some fun with his podcast hat and all
podcasts.
You can check him out on KCSN coming up in just under an hour, about 40 minutes
it'll be almost exactly an hour if I had to guess.
Who's going to be late? Who do you think it is?
Do you know how that goes? Are you genuinely, because I think there may be a misconception behind the scenes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Here's the director's commentary for Only Weird Games. Seth has a real job as a lawyer, right? He's the best lawyer in his county as far as I can figure. And you would think like, oh, well, sometimes Seth has things that run long, and every once in a while that'll happen. His other work is a little bit more urgent, a little more vital than the podcast. 95% of the time, it's Nate. 95%. I mean, the number of times that me, Nate, and Tucker are waiting on Seth, twice a season. The fingers of Nate Taylor, as he often says, they were meant to type, and he is great at that. He's an exceptional writer, orator, all of those things. His fingers were not meant for checking clocks, and so that's just he lives his life a quarter mile at a time, and he enters press conference rooms 5 seconds before Andy Reid comes through. He's got a good feel for it. But if you're waiting on Only Weird Games later and you say, that's weird, it says it starts at 4:35 and it's 4:45 and there's no show yet. Odds are me, Seth, and Tucker are ready.
Well, because odds are, if it's not Seth, I don't think it's you, because you typically are on time for this show.
I was like really cutting it extremely close today, and
You do.
It's never me.
You always cut it close, but there's nothing wrong with a little cutting it close.
No,
you're just trimming the fat off. You're just cutting. Why wait when you can just hop in right away and the boys can party?
Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to just barely beat the clock. And the good news is I did put on a shirt before we started the show. I have done this entire show Winnie the Pooh style, but you can't see that.
I'll call you Creed because this is my sacrifice. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Richard behind the scenes doing his thing. Briscoe, again, JB Briscoe on the X. Myself at Home and Stretch KC. I'll be back tomorrow with Adam Best. Until next time, we are out.